I worked as a substitute teacher at a high school for almost a year. Most of the assignments were boring. Cover a class, take attendance, make sure nobody breaks anything, and go home. But there was one school where I was given a strange instruction before my first shift. The secretary handed me a printed schedule and said, "Your classroom is B14. I looked at the map attached to the schedule. There was no B14. I pointed this out. She stared at the paper for a moment. Then she said, "Oh, right." She crossed out B14 and wrote B12. I didn't think much of it. The school was old, and the map looked like it had been printed years ago. My first day went normally, until lunch. A student came up to me and asked, "Are you teaching B14? I laughed. "No, B12. He looked uncomfortable. Then he said, "Good." I asked him what he meant. He just walked away. That afternoon, another teacher mentioned B14. I asked her about it. She immediately changed the subject. I thought maybe there had been a classroom there years ago. I was right. The school had been renovated about 15 years earlier. Several classrooms had been removed, and the hallway had been shortened. Apparently, B14 had been one of those rooms. I forgot about it until my third week. I was covering detention after school. At around 5:20 p.m., I was walking toward the staff room when I noticed a door at the end of the hallway. I had never seen it before. There was a small metal plate on it, B14. I stopped. The hallway was completely empty. I looked at the school map on my phone. The hallway wasn't supposed to continue that far. I walked closer. The door was slightly open. Inside was a classroom. Old desks, old blackboard, old posters on the walls. Everything looked like it had been untouched for years. Then I noticed the attendance sheet on the teacher's desk. It had names written on it. I picked it up. The dates were from 15 years earlier. I started reading the names. Then I noticed something strange. Every student had been marked present, except one. The name was circled in red. Ethan Miller. Next to it was written, "Absent." I put the sheet down. Then I heard a chair scrape behind me. I turned around. Every desk was empty. I stepped into the hallway and closed the door. The next morning, I asked the principal about B14. He stared at me. There is no B14. I told him what I'd seen. He didn't laugh. Instead, he asked me exactly where the door was. I showed him. He walked with me. When we reached the end of the hallway, there was just a brick wall, no door. I asked him what happened. He said the wall had been there for years. Then he told me something else. 15 years earlier, a student named Ethan Miller had disappeared from school. He had been reported absent from his last class. Nobody ever found out where he went. I asked if he had disappeared from B14. The principal didn't answer. He just said, "Don't go looking for that room again." I tried to forget about it. A week later, I was covering the same school again. During lunch, I noticed one of the students staring at me. He walked over. "Did you find it?" I asked what he meant. He lowered his voice. "B14. I asked him why he knew about it. He looked around before answering. Sometimes teachers see it. I asked him what was inside. He said, "Usually nothing." Then he looked directly at me. "But sometimes Ethan is there." I laughed nervously. "Who's Ethan?" The student didn't answer. He just walked away. That afternoon, I was leaving the school when I noticed something on the floor outside my car. A folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was a photocopy of an old attendance sheet, the same one I'd seen in B14, but this time the date had been changed. It was today's date. My name was written at the bottom. Next to it was one word: present. I quit taking assignments at that school. I never went back. Several months later, I found the old school online. The building had been demolished. The website included a short article about the school's history. There was a photograph of the old B wing. I zoomed in. At the very end of the hallway was a classroom door, B14, and standing in front of it was a teenage boy. The caption said the photograph had been taken 15 years earlier. I recognized the boy immediately. It was Ethan Miller. But what bothered me wasn't the photograph. It was the handwritten note someone had added beneath it. 4 words. He was never absent. When I was 17, I stayed late at school almost every Thursday for basketball practice. The school was in a small town, and after 8 p.m., the building became almost completely empty. One Thursday, practice ended earlier than usual. I walked outside around 7:40. It was already dark. The school parking lot was nearly empty. I didn't have a car, so I normally took the city bus home. The last bus usually came at 8:05. I stood at the bus stop beside the school and waited. At 8:03, a bus pulled up. I got on. The driver didn't say anything. I sat near the back. There were only 2 other passengers, an elderly woman and a boy wearing a school uniform. I didn't recognize the boy. The bus started moving. After a few minutes, I realized we weren't going toward my neighborhood. I walked toward the driver. "Excuse me, does this bus go to Oak Street?" He didn't answer. I repeated myself. Nothing. I looked out the window. The streets didn't look familiar. I went back to my seat. The boy in the school uniform was staring at me. After a few seconds, he whispered, "You shouldn't have gotten on." I laughed nervously. "Why?" He looked toward the front of the bus. "Because this bus doesn't stop anymore." I didn't understand what he meant. I stood up again. This time, the driver spoke. "Sit down." His voice was flat. I asked him to let me off at the next stop. He didn't respond. The elderly woman suddenly grabbed my wrist. Her hand was freezing. She whispered, "Don't make him angry." I pulled my hand away. The bus continued driving. The windows were fogging up. I checked my phone. No signal. The time was 8:17. I looked outside again. We were driving past my school. I recognized the football field, but something was wrong. The school was completely dark, and there were no cars in the parking lot. I watched the building disappear behind us. Then I saw someone standing at the bus stop. It was me. I was standing there, wearing the same clothes, the same backpack, the same jacket. I stared through the window as the bus passed. The other passengers didn't react. I turned toward the boy. He was crying. I asked him who the person at the bus stop was. He whispered, "You." The bus kept moving. I tried the doors. They wouldn't open. I asked the driver where we were going. He finally looked at me through the mirror. "You already know." I didn't. Then the elderly woman said, "You just don't remember yet." The bus turned onto a road I had never seen. There were no houses, no streetlights, just trees. Then the boy stood up. He walked toward me. "Get off when I tell you." I asked him why. He pointed toward the front. The driver had disappeared. The driver's seat was empty, but the bus was still moving. I grabbed the handrail. The boy whispered, "Now." The doors suddenly opened. The bus was still moving. Outside was darkness. I jumped. I landed on wet grass. The bus continued down the road. I watched its red lights disappear between the trees. Then everything went silent. I started walking. After almost an hour, I finally reached a road. A car stopped, and the driver took me to a gas station. I called my parents. They were terrified. I had been missing for almost 6 hours. I told them I'd gotten on a bus after basketball practice. My father looked confused. He said, "There hasn't been a bus running that route at night for years." I thought he was mistaken. Then he told me why. A city bus had crashed on that road 12 years earlier. The driver and 2 passengers died. I asked who the passengers were. My father looked at me strangely. One was an elderly woman. The other was a teenage boy. Both had been wearing the same clothes they were wearing when they died. I couldn't sleep after that. For weeks, I avoided buses. Then one afternoon, I found something in my backpack, a folded bus ticket. I hadn't seen it before. The date printed on it was 12 years old. On the back, someone had written, "You got off too early." I threw it away. Years passed. I stopped thinking about the incident until last winter. I was visiting my hometown for the first time in years. I drove past my old school after dark. The bus stop was still there. I slowed down. Then there was a bus parked beside it. No lights, no driver. I kept driving. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. A teenage boy was standing at the bus stop. He was wearing an old school uniform, and he was holding a bus ticket. He raised it toward me. I couldn't see what was written on it, but I knew exactly what it said, because I had seen those words before. "You got off too early."